Get comfortable. Turn the lamp down or off entirely, whichever suits you. Settle the pillow the way you like it, and let your shoulders come down from wherever they have been sitting all day. There is nothing left to do tonight, and nothing in the next 2 hours will ask anything of you. You can drift off in the middle of a sentence and lose nothing at all. Tonight, we are going back to a single evening. Not a year, not a reign, not a broad sweep of a century. One evening, in one house in London, in the spring of 1879. The evening before a 17-year-old girl is presented at court. You have almost certainly seen the picture of that moment already, even if you have never gone looking for it. It arrives fully assembled. A young woman in white, 3 feathers standing upright in her hair, a train of silk falling behind her across a polished floor. A doorway, a room full of light, an older woman in dark silk watching from the edge with her hands folded. The girl steps forward. She sinks into a curtsey so deep it looks like it should be impossible, holds it, rises, and moves away without ever turning her back. And the whole thing has the quality of something that simply happened to her, the way weather happens. She was 17, she was well-born, and so of course she floated into a ballroom and out again on the other side of girlhood. That version is not exactly false. Every physical detail of it is accurate. The white, the feathers, the train, the curtsey, the walking backwards. All of that is real, and we will get to every piece of it in some detail, because the details are far stranger and far more interesting than the painting. But the picture is missing the thing that matters. It shows you the last 20 seconds of a process that took, depending on how you count, either 6 months or 10 years. It shows you the finished product and asks you to believe in magic. There is no magic in it. What there is instead is a great deal of unpaid administration, a considerable amount of borrowed money, several thousand hours of somebody else's needlework, a rented house the family cannot really afford, a mother who has been running the entire operation, like a campaign, for the better part of a year, and a girl who has been in training for this afternoon since she was about 7, and has been told gently and constantly, and from every direction, that the rest of her life will be decided by how well she performs. So tonight, we are not going to the ballroom. We are going to the night before. We are going to the hours between about 5 in the afternoon and something past 2 in the morning, in a rented house in Belgravia, in a household where almost nobody is going to sleep properly. There is a dress arriving in pieces. There is a train that has to be measured against a rule laid down by a royal household. There are 3 ostrich feathers in a box that have to sit at a particular angle in a particular place, and if they do not, a great deal of trouble follows. There is a carpet rolled back in the drawing room, and a chair standing in for a throne, and a movement performed again and again and again, until an ankle starts to complain. There is a card of admission on the hall table that has been read so many times it is memorized, and will be read once more before bed anyway. And there is a family sitting around a plain dinner, eaten early and eaten light, all of them entirely aware that what they are engaged in is not a party. It is a transaction conducted in white silk, and every person at that table understands the terms. That is the version we are going to walk through tonight. Slowly, hour by hour, stopping whenever there is something worth stopping for, which turns out to be roughly every 10 minutes. I want to say something about how this will work, because the shape of it matters. We will move through the evening in something close to real time. You will be inside it, doing what a girl in that position actually did, in the order she actually did it. But every so often, we will stop and step back, because the thing happening in front of you will only make sense if you know what it cost, or who invented it, or what it was quietly sorting people into. A dress is not just a dress. A curtsey is not just a curtsey. When we get to the feathers, we are going to spend a while on the feathers, because the rules governing 3 ostrich plumes turn out to explain a surprising amount about how an entire class of people organized itself. Those pauses are where the actual history lives. The rest is the room, and the light, and the sound of somebody moving about downstairs. If you have found this channel useful for falling asleep, it does help enormously if you subscribe, and if you feel like leaving a comment, tell me where in the world you are and what time it is where you are now. I read them, usually at a very unreasonable hour, and it is always a pleasure to see how many different midnights are happening at once. Right, let the room go soft. It is the 29th of April, 1879. The season has just opened, which is to say that a few thousand families who spend most of the year on land somewhere else in Britain have converged on a small number of streets in the west of London, all at once, for about 3 months. They have brought their horses, their servants, their daughters, and, in a good many cases, considerably more optimism than money. You are one of the daughters. You are 17, tomorrow afternoon, in a room at St. James's Palace. You will be presented to the Queen, or more likely, to whoever is standing in for the Queen, because she has largely withdrawn from that particular duty by now, and the drawing rooms are frequently held on her behalf. You will wear white. You will wear 3 feathers and a veil. You will carry a bouquet and a fan, and you will have very little idea what to do with your hands. You will sink into a curtsey that has been drilled into your legs over a period of weeks. You will rise, and you will leave the room walking backwards, while managing several feet of silk behind you that you cannot see and are not permitted to look at. The whole thing will take somewhere under a minute. And when it is finished, something will have changed about you in a way that is entirely invisible and completely real. You will have been certified, not as an aristocrat, because you already were one, more or less, in the loose and anxious way that a family with land and a middling income counts as one. Certified as available. Certified as respectable, as vouched for, as the sort of young woman who may be introduced to the sort of young man whose family will want to know exactly who her people are before anybody dances with anybody. That is what the afternoon is for. It is not an introduction to society in the sense of a welcome. It is an introduction in the sense of a document. Everyone involved knows this. Nobody says it in quite those words, but nobody needs to, because the entire apparatus around you is organized on that assumption. The rented house is organized on it. The dressmaker's bill is organized on it. Your mother's list, currently sitting on the writing table downstairs, with items ticked off in 3 different inks because it has been going for so long, is organized on it entirely. So here is the first thing that the painting gets wrong, and it is worth getting it out of the way before we go up the front steps. The girl in white is not the subject of the picture. She is the product. That sounds harsher than I mean it. Nobody in this house is cruel. Your mother is not scheming over you the way a novel would have her scheme. She is exhausted. She is worried about the bills, and she is doing the only job that has ever been available to her, which is to secure her daughter's futures through the only mechanism that exists for securing them. Your father is not indifferent. He has simply been placed, by custom, several rooms away from the actual work, and he will pay for it, and sign for it, and take almost no part in it. And you are not a victim of anything. You are, by tomorrow afternoon, going to be extremely good at something difficult. That is the part that gets lost. What you have been trained in is not decoration. It is memory, endurance, physical control under observation, and the ability to read a room full of people at speed and correctly. Those are real skills. They are hard to acquire. Almost nobody will ever call them work. We are going to hold both of those things at the same time for the next couple of hours, and I am not going to resolve them for you at the end, because they did not resolve. The house we are going to is on a street where the plaster is still fairly new, and the railings are painted black, and the lamps are being lit early, because the light is going. There is coal smoke sitting low over the square, the way it does in the spring when the air is heavy. Somewhere on the first floor, a maid is pressing something, and the smell of hot fabric is drifting out onto the landing and down the stairs. Inside, on the hall table, there is a card. In the drawing room, the carpet has been rolled back. Upstairs, a bed has been made and will barely be used, and in about half an hour, a dressmaker's assistant is going to come up the area, steps carrying 2 wrapped parcels, and the real work of the evening is going to begin. Let us go in. It is the last week of April in 1879, and the season has just begun. That phrase, the season, meant something quite specific and quite narrow. It meant the months when Parliament sat, roughly from the end of April through to the middle of August, and when the families who owned land, and the families who wanted to marry into land, came up from the counties and installed themselves in London. It began with the drawing rooms at court, and it ended when everyone went north to shoot. In between, there were dinners and balls and concerts, and the opera, and the flower show, and the regatta, and the whole thing operated on a calendar that everyone involved knew by heart, and nobody had ever written down in one place. You have come up from the country for it. Your family does this every year now, and has done for the last 4. But this year is different, because this year you are the reason for it. The house is in Belgravia, a few streets back from the grander squares, on a terrace where the stucco is white and the front steps are scrubbed every morning, and the railings have been repainted recently enough that you can still smell it faintly on a warm afternoon. It has 4 floors and a basement and a narrow strip of area at the front where the coal goes down and the tradesmen come up. It is a perfectly respectable address. It is not a fashionable one. Your mother knows the difference exactly, and has decided this year that respectable within walking distance is worth more than fashionable a mile out, and she is almost certainly right. The house is not yours. This is the first thing to understand about it, because it explains a good deal of what happens tonight. Your family does not own a house in London. Very few families of your income did. What you own is land, somewhere in the west of England, and a house on it that has been in the family for 140 years, and a rent roll that, in a good year, produces something in the region of £2,200. That is a substantial income. It puts you comfortably inside the top fraction of a percent of the country. It also has almost nothing to do with cash, because rents come in twice a year, and the estate absorbs a great deal of what they produce before anything reaches your father's hands. And the last 3 years of agricultural prices have been poor in a way that everyone in the county is talking about, and nobody in this house is going to mention aloud this week. So the house is rented, furnished for the season, from the middle of April to the end of July, at a figure your father has not stated in front of you, and which is somewhere around £400 for the 3 months. On top of that come the extra servants, the carriage, the horses, the coal, the food for a household entertaining at a level it does not entertain at home, and the dresses. The dresses alone, for one girl, for one season, will come to something between £200 and £300, and that is being careful. Set that against the income, and you can see the shape of it. A very large portion of 1 year's revenue, spent in 4 months, on the presentation and circulation of a single 17-year-old. You are 17. Your birthday was in February. You are the eldest of 4, with a sister of 14, who is watching all of this extremely closely, and 2 brothers, one at school, and one still in the nursery at home with a nurse, and no idea any of this is happening. Your father is 51. He is downstairs in a small back room that the letting agent described as the library, which contains about 60 books, most of them somebody else's. He is answering a letter from his agent about a tenant and a drainage question, and he will be in that room for most of the evening. And this is not indifference exactly, though it looks like it. It is division of labor, of a kind so complete that neither of your parents thinks of it as a division at all. Your mother is 44. She was presented herself in 1852 by an aunt, and she remembers the whole of it, and she has been preparing for tonight in some form or another since you were about 7 years old. She is at this moment on the first floor landing with a list in her hand. This is worth slowing down for, because that list is the actual center of gravity of this house. The list is on a folded sheet of writing paper, and it has been added to over about 6 weeks, and it is not organized by category. It is organized by the order in which things must be finished. Bodice, arriving this evening. Train, arriving this evening, to be measured against the regulation. Veil, in the house already, to be pressed. Plumes in their box, to be checked for the 3rd time. Gloves, 4 pairs, 1 to be worn tomorrow, and 3 in reserve. Shoes, white satin, already stretched. Fan. Bouquet, ordered to arrive in the morning before 11. Hairdresser, engaged for 9. Carriage, engaged. And this is the item your mother has checked most often, because on the day of a drawing room, the demand for hired carriages in this part of London becomes something close to absurd, and a family that has not booked 1 week's in advance will find itself standing on a doorstep in full court dress at 2 in the afternoon, with nowhere to go. Everything on that list is a small logistical problem, and every one of them has been solved, and the solving of them has taken your mother the better part of 2 months, and nobody will ever record any of it anywhere. The house itself is doing its best to keep up. There is a cook downstairs who came up with you from the country and who is finding the London range unfamiliar and is not happy about it. There is your mother's maid, who is 38 and has been with her for 11 years, and who has been quietly appointed to look after you as well for the duration, which she has views about. There are 2 housemaids hired locally for the season through an agency at something like £18 a year each, who arrived a fortnight ago and are still learning where things are. There is a footman, hired in the same way, who was engaged mainly because he is 6'1" and looks correct standing behind a carriage, and this is stated openly by everyone including him. At the top of the house, under the roof, the rooms are small and get very hot in the afternoon and very cold at night. And that is where most of those people sleep. On the floor below, you have a bedroom with a window facing the street, a washstand, a wardrobe that is not yours, and a bed that has been made this morning with clean linen, and which, by the end of tonight, will have been lain in for perhaps 4 hours. The light is going now. In London, in the last week of April, the sun is down a little after 7, and the lamplighter has already come along the terrace with his pole, and there is that particular quality of early evening in a city where the cold smoke sits and the gas is coming up, and everything at a distance of more than about 80 yards has gone soft and grey and slightly brown at the edges. Somebody is pressing something on the floor above. You can smell it on the stairs. Hot linen and a faint scorch that means the iron has been left on the trivet a moment too long, and you can hear the flat, deliberate thump of it going down and being lifted and going down again. Below that, further off, there is the ordinary noise of the street. Wheels on stone, a horse standing and shifting, somebody 2 houses down having a door closed for them. And that is the house at about 6:30 in the evening, on the night before you are presented at court. Here is what has to happen between now and morning. The bodice and the train are arriving within the half hour, brought by hand from a workroom off Wigmore Street, and they will be tried on and checked, and the train in particular must be measured, because the length is not a matter of taste. It is prescribed, and getting it wrong is not a fashion error. It is a failure to comply with an instruction from the Lord Chamberlain's office. The plumes must be positioned and repositioned until they sit correctly, and the veil must be arranged with them, and this will take longer than anyone expects, and will be done in front of a mirror in your mother's room, with 2 candles brought over from the other side of the house, because the light is not good enough. The curtsey must be rehearsed. The carpet in the drawing room has already been rolled back for this. A chair has been placed at one end. You have done this perhaps 200 times over the last 3 months, and you will do it another 40 tonight, and the difficulty is not the curtsey itself, which you can do in your sleep, but the reverse, because you must leave the presence walking backwards, managing a length of silk behind you that you are not permitted to look at. There will be a dinner in the middle of all this, eaten early and eaten light, because nobody wants to work in a tight bodice on a full stomach. There will be a trial arrangement of your hair tonight to confirm that the pins will hold the plumes, so that tomorrow morning the hairdresser is confirming a known result rather than attempting an experiment. And at some point after all of it, near midnight or past it, you will be sent to bed in a room where the dress is hanging on the outside of the wardrobe door, pale in the dark, at the exact angle where you can see it from the pillow. You will not sleep much. Almost nobody did. Downstairs, the bell in the area is about to be pulled, and the parcels are about to come up the steps, and the evening is about to acquire its actual shape. Before the bell goes, and before the parcels come up, this is worth slowing down for, because the whole evening ahead of you makes very little sense unless you understand what it is actually for. The story told about a presentation at court, told at the time and told ever since, is that a young woman of good family is introduced to society. The word used is introduced, as though society were a room full of pleasant strangers and you are being brought in to meet them. The word used is also come out, as in a girl comes out this season, which suggests emergence, a door opening, a life beginning. Both phrases are doing a great deal of work to make something sound like a courtesy when it is in fact a procedure. Here is the plainer version. A presentation at court is a certification. It is the moment at which a young woman is formally confirmed by the highest available authority as a person of a certain kind, respectable, correctly connected, of a family whose standing has been checked and found acceptable, and therefore eligible to be considered for marriage by men of the same class. Everything that follows in the season depends on that certification having been granted. Without it, a girl can still go to private dances and still meet young men and still, in the end, marry perfectly well, but she does so without the stamp. And in a world that runs on the stamp, that is a measurable disadvantage. The court itself is not looking for charm. The court is looking for correctness. Your dress will be inspected against a published standard. Your sponsor's own credentials will have been checked before yours were. Your father's position will have been considered. The curtsey you are about to rehearse 40 times is not admired for its grace. It is checked for its adequacy. Nobody at the palace is going to remember your face. That is not the point. The point is that after tomorrow afternoon, a particular sentence becomes true about you and can be said about you by other people in rooms you are not in. Now, the sponsor. This is the part of the system that reveals its own logic most clearly, and it is very simple. You cannot present yourself. You must be presented by a woman who has herself been presented. That woman vouches for you, in a formal sense, with her own standing as the security. Follow that rule backwards, and you will see what it does. It means the whole structure is a closed chain, each link guaranteed by the one before it, running back through generations of women who were each admitted because someone already inside chose to open the door. A family entirely outside the chain cannot simply apply. It must find someone inside willing to reach out. And here is the part that is not sentimental at all. That willingness is a thing of value, and everybody involved knows it. An aunt, a godmother, a family friend who married well, a woman with a title and a modest income who is glad of the connection. Sponsorship is a favor with a price, though the price is rarely money. The price is obligation and invitation, and the understanding that a debt now exists. In your case, the sponsor is a cousin of your mother's, married to a man with a house in the country and a seat in the Commons, presented herself in the year 1858, and she has been written to 4 times since January. Your mother's tone in those letters was carefully judged, warm but not effusive, grateful but not obviously so. There is an entire grammar of asking for things in this world, and your mother is fluent in it, which brings us to what the whole enterprise costs, because the numbers are where the fiction falls apart entirely. Start with this house. Your family does not live in London. The house you are sitting in was rented for the season, 3 months, furnished, in a street that carries the right address. A house of this size in this part of town, let for the season, runs somewhere in the region of £300 to £400 for the 3 months, and that is before you have put a single lump of coal in a single grate. Add the temporary servants, added to the staff brought from home. Add the food, which must be adequate to give dinners, because a family that receives invitations and never returns them stops receiving them. Then the carriage. You cannot arrive anywhere on foot. A private carriage kept in London for the season, with the horses and the coachman and the stabling, comes to something in the range of £200, and hiring by the evening instead is cheaper per outing, but adds up alarmingly once you are going out 5 nights a week. Then the clothes. Not the court dress alone, which we will come to, but the whole wardrobe a season requires. A young woman going out constantly cannot be seen repeatedly in the same gown. She needs day dresses and dinner dresses and ball gowns. She needs the gloves, which are worn once or twice, and then are no longer white. She needs shoes and fans and wraps and the endless small replacements. Estimates from the period put a débutante's season wardrobe at somewhere between £200 and £500, depending on how ambitious the family is being. And the court dress itself, the one arriving in parcels within the hour, might account for 1/5 of that on its own. Add the flowers. Add the hairdresser, who will come tomorrow morning, and again perhaps 30 times over the summer. Add the chaperone's own dresses, because your mother must also be correctly turned out, and it would be a poor economy to dress the daughter beautifully and let the mother look shabby beside her. Put it together, and a family running a proper London season for one daughter is spending somewhere between £1,000 and £1,500 across 3 months, and it can go far higher. Now set that against income, because the number means nothing on its own. Your father has land. The land brings in something in the region of £2,000 a year, which places your family comfortably within the gentry, and nowhere near the great fortunes. A country solicitor in a decent practice might make £400 a year and consider himself doing well. A curate makes 120 and is expected to look like a gentleman on it. The housemaid who lit the lamps on the landing an hour ago earns £16 a year, with her food and her bed. So the season, for your family, consumes something between 1/2 and 3/4 of an entire year's income. It is paid for by economizing elsewhere for the rest of the year, by not repairing what can be left unrepaired, and in a great many families, by borrowing. Your father has had a conversation with his bank that you were not told about and are not supposed to know occurred. You know it occurred. That is the real character of the thing. It is a substantial capital investment made by a family with a fixed and unremarkable income in the expectation of a return. The return is a marriage, not necessarily a brilliant one, a sound one, a husband with an income that can support a household from a family that will not embarrass yours, arrived at within a reasonable number of seasons, so that the investment does not have to be made repeatedly. Everyone involved understands this. That is the part modern retellings tend to soften, as though the economics were a shameful secret that the participants would have blushed to admit. They would not have blushed. Your mother would explain it to you in exactly these terms if you asked her directly, and has, more than once, in fewer words. A girl of your class is not being deceived about the purpose of her season. She is being trained in it. The romance and the economics are not in tension in her mind. They are the same subject. What the fiction accomplishes is something narrower. It allows the transaction to be conducted in a language of pleasure and courtesy. It is the reason nobody at a ball will ever say a figure out loud, though every mother in the room knows every figure that matters. It is why the whole apparatus is conducted in white silk and ostrich feathers, rather than in a solicitor's office, though there will be a solicitor's office eventually, and a settlement drawn up, and terms agreed in language considerably less poetic than anything spoken in a ballroom. Consider what it means that a girl's entire preparation, the deportment lessons, and the French, and the piano, and the 10 years of instruction in how to sit and how to enter a room, is described by everybody as accomplishments, as though they were ornaments she gathered up for her own pleasure. They are not ornaments. They are qualifications. She has been in training since she was 7 for a single examination, conducted over a period of roughly 3 months, with a small number of retakes permitted, which is why nobody in this house is going to sleep properly tonight. Downstairs, your mother is at the writing table in the back room, with the lamp pulled close, going through a list. She keeps it on a folded sheet of paper that has been folded and unfolded so many times it has gone soft at the creases. Gloves, ordered, arriving. Fan here. Bouquet, arranged with the florist for the morning. White flowers only. Nothing scented strongly enough to be a nuisance in a warm room. Carriage confirmed for 1 o'clock. Sponsor confirmed, with the time she will call for you. Card of admission on the hall table, where it has been for 6 days. She ticks each one with a pencil, and then she goes back to the top and reads the whole list again from the beginning, which she has done perhaps 9 times since Tuesday, and which she will do again tonight after you have gone up, and once more in the morning before the light is properly in the windows. She is not anxious in a way that shows. She is simply a woman who has understood for a long time precisely what is at stake in the next 24 hours, and who has no intention of being the reason any part of it goes wrong. At 6 o'clock, the bell goes in the area below, and the dressmaker's assistant comes up the back stairs with 2 parcels, one under each arm, both wrapped in unbleached cotton and tied with tape rather than string, because string cuts and marks silk through a single layer of cloth. She is perhaps 20. She has walked from a workroom off Wigmore Street, and she has done this walk twice today already, and she will do it once more tomorrow morning with the final press. She sets the parcels down on the long table on the first floor landing, which has been cleared and covered with a clean sheet for exactly this purpose, and she unties the tape slowly, the way you might unwrap something breakable, which in a sense it is. The bodice comes out first. It has no sleeves to speak of, only the small shaped bands that sit off the shoulder, and it is entirely stiff, holding its own shape on the table like a piece of furniture. Then the skirt, in its own wrapping. Then, last, the train, folded in 4 with tissue between every fold. And when she lifts it out and lets it fall open along the length of the landing, it takes up more floor than you expected. It goes past the top of the stairs. It has to be gathered back before anyone can get by. This is the first thing worth slowing down for, because the train is not decoration. It is a requirement laid down in writing, and everything about this evening proceeds from that fact. A presentation at court is governed by a published dress code. It is not folklore, and it is not a matter of taste. The Lord Chamberlain's office issues the regulations. The newspapers print them. The court dressmakers keep copies and quote from them. And a woman who arrives in the wrong thing will not be admitted, or will be admitted and remembered for the wrong reason, which in this world amounts to nearly the same outcome. So the requirements are followed with the literal mindedness of people filling in a customs form. The dress must be white, or as near to white as makes no difference, for a young woman making her first appearance. Cream is permitted. Ivory is permitted. A very pale silver is tolerated. Actual color is for married women and for those with a reason. The bodice must be cut low, and the sleeves must be short, no matter the month, no matter the weather, no matter that the woman wearing it will be standing in a corridor for 2 hours before she is anywhere near a fire. The train must hang from the shoulders, and it must measure a specified length, roughly 3 yards from the shoulder as it lies along the floor, and it must not be shorter to save cloth or longer to make an impression. The head must carry 3 white ostrich plumes, arranged so that they are visible from the front. A veil of white tulle must fall from the hair. Gloves must be long and white. Nothing about any of this is left to the imagination of the person wearing it. The effect of a rule book this specific is that hundreds of young women arrive at the same building on the same afternoon, dressed at a distance identically, which is rather the point. What is being displayed is not individuality. It is compliance, and the resources required to comply. Look at what is on the table. The skirt is silk, and under the silk there is a lining of silk, and under that there is a stiffened interlining, and the whole is mounted over a foundation that carries its own structure. The bodice is where the real engineering sits. Turn it over, and you can see the inside, which nobody at court will ever see, and which is finished as carefully as the outside. There are bones in it, strips of whalebone cased in cotton tape and stitched down along every seam, 10 or 12 of them, so that the bodice stands upright on the table without anybody in it. There are hooks and eyes down the back, a great many of them, set close so the closure cannot gape between them. There is a waist tape inside, fastened separately, so that the weight of the skirt hangs from the tape rather than dragging on the outer fabric. There are small loops at the shoulders, reinforced with extra layers, and those loops are what the train will be attached to, because 3 yards of silk is heavy, and the weight of it has to be carried somewhere, and where it is carried is your shoulders. The seams are hand-finished. The machine has existed for 30 years, and it is used, but it is used for the long, straight interior work, and everything that shows or takes strain is done by hand. The boning cases are stitched by hand. The hooks are stitched by hand, each one with a bar of thread over the base. The hem of the train is faced and weighted by hand. The lace at the edge is applied by hand. If you added up the hours in the object lying on this table, without counting the design or the fittings or the cutting, you would arrive at something in the region of 150 hours of skilled needlework, and possibly a good deal more. That work was done by a room full of women, and it was done in the last 11 days, because the fitting that established the final measurements was late, and the season does not move for anybody. Now the money, because the numbers here tell a story that nothing else tells as plainly. A court dress of this kind, from a good London house, made to order in the correct silk with the train, the veil, and the trimming, will come to somewhere between 30 and 60 pounds. The plumes are extra. The gloves are extra. The fan is extra. The shoes are extra. Call the whole assembly, from the hair down, 50 pounds, and be glad if it comes in under. The dressmaker who took the order is a woman with a house in the West End, a name that families repeat to each other, and an establishment employing perhaps 40 hands. She will clear a good margin on this dress, and she will clear it on the 90 or so others she has agreed to make for this season. And she will spend a considerable part of the year worrying about clients who take 18 months to settle their accounts, because the higher the family, the slower the payment, and everybody in the trade knows it. The young woman standing in your hallway who carried the parcels is an improver, which means she has passed the first unpaid years and is now being paid something. Something is roughly £15 a year, with food and a bed in a room over the workroom, shared with 3 others. The skilled hands who set the bones and worked the hem earn more, perhaps £25 or £30 a year. And during the season, they will work until 11 at night. And in the worst weeks of April and May, they will work later than that. And the workroom lamps in that part of London burn very late indeed in the spring. So the dress on the table represents about 2 years of one woman's wages, and it took 12 women 11 days to make, and it will be worn once. Not principally once. Once. The train can be detached, and the skirt can be recut and remade later for other purposes. And it very probably will be, because families of this income do not throw silk away. But the object, as it exists tonight, in this exact configuration, has a working life of about 4 hours. Nobody in the house finds this strange, including you. It is simply the cost of the examination. The assistant asks you to step up. There is a low stool on the landing, brought from the housekeeper's room, and you take off your shoes and stand on it in your stockings, while your mother and the assistant work around you. The skirt goes on first, and it is heavier than it looks even without the train. Then the bodice. And this takes time, because the hooks must be done from the bottom upward, and each one has to sit properly before the next is closed. You are told to breathe out. You breathe out. The bodice closes. What happens then is that your posture changes without your consent. The bones do not allow you to round your back They do not allow you to lean over. They hold your ribs in a fixed shape, and they push your shoulders back and down. And the effect is that you are standing the way a woman of your class is supposed to stand, not because you have remembered to, but because the garment will not permit the alternative. 10 years of being told to sit up straight, accomplished in 11 days of needlework. Then they bring the train. It goes on at the shoulders, hooked to those reinforced loops, and the moment it is fastened, you feel it, a steady downward pull at the back of both shoulders, quite unlike anything you have worn before. It is not painful. It is simply constant. It will be constant for 4 hours tomorrow, in a warm corridor, standing. The assistant kneels and works along the hem with pins in her mouth, checking that the front of the skirt clears the floor by the correct fraction and does not touch, because a hem that touches will catch under your own foot at the worst possible moment. Your mother stands back by the banister where she can see the whole line and says nothing for a long time, and then says that the left shoulder sits a shade higher than the right. The assistant looks, adjusts, looks again. It is agreed that it is now correct. Turn slowly, they tell you. You turn, and the train comes round after you, slower than you are, arriving a beat late, sweeping over the boards and gathering a little as it goes. And you understand for the first time, physically rather than in theory, why you have spent a fortnight learning to walk backwards. The box comes down from the top of the wardrobe, where it has been kept since the day it arrived, and it is bigger than the thing inside it needs. That is the point of it. The plumes must never be pressed. Inside, laid in a nest of tissue, are 3 white ostrich feathers. They are not what you expected the first time you saw them, and they are not quite what you expect now. Photographs and engravings make them look solid, like 3 tidy white flames. In the hand, they are almost nothing. The quill has weight to it, a firm, ridged spine you could snap between 2 fingers if you were careless. But the barbs themselves move in the draught from under the door. You breathe on one, and half of it stirs. They cost, the 3 of them together, something in the region of £2, which is roughly what the assistant standing on the landing an hour ago earns in 11 or 12 weeks of workroom labour. And they weigh, in total, less than a folded handkerchief. Your mother takes them from you and holds them against the back of your head, and immediately says no, and turns them and says no again. Here is something worth slowing down for, because the feathers are the part of the whole apparatus that people most often assume was decorative whim. It was not whim. The 3 plumes were required. A young woman being presented at court wore them, and a married woman being presented wore them. And if you arrived without them, you did not go in. They had been required for so long, by 1879, that nobody in the house could have told you with confidence where the rule came from. Only that it was the rule, and had been since before your mother's own presentation. The usual explanation given at the time connected them to the badge of the Prince of Wales, 3 feathers rising from a coronet. And whether or not that is the true origin, it was the explanation everyone repeated, and repeated explanations become their own kind of authority. What matters more than the origin is the specificity. It was not simply feathers. It was 3. White for an unmarried girl. Worn at the back of the head high enough to be visible above the coiffure, and set so that they rise rather than droop, which is the entire difficulty, because a feather is a thing that wants to droop. And they were to be arranged so that the queen, or whoever was receiving on her behalf, could see them clearly as you approached, from a distance, across a crowded room, above a sea of other heads. That last detail explains everything about the next hour of your evening. The plumes are not there for you to look at. You will barely see them. They are there to be legible from 20 feet away by a woman who will look at you for something under 9 seconds. Your mother tries the arrangement a third way, fanned slightly, the center feather standing tallest, and the 2 outer ones angled a little back and out. She holds them in place with her left hand and reaches with her right for the veil. The veil is tulle, a fine white net, and it is arranged not over your face, as a bride's would be, but falling from the back of the head, from the same point as the plumes, down over the shoulders. There is a permitted length, and there is a length that is common, and they are not the same thing. Too short, and you look as though you have economized. Too long, and you have added another yard of fabric to trail behind you, in a room where you must already walk backwards over a train you cannot see. Most families settled on something falling to about the elbow, which is long enough to read as proper and short enough not to become another hazard. Yours is at the elbow. Your mother measured it against your arm herself, twice, on 2 different days, in case she had been wrong the first time. The tulle and the plumes go together at the same point. And this is the engineering problem that will occupy the hairdresser in the morning. 3 quills, a quantity of net, and a head of hair, all fastened at one place, and the whole assembly required to hold absolutely still through 4 hours of standing, 1 deep curtsey, and a backwards walk out of a room. It is fastened with pins, with a small comb, with more pins, and in some households with a wire frame concealed inside the coiffure to give the quills something rigid to be lashed to. Nothing about it is comfortable. Everything about it is designed to survive the afternoon. Your mother steps back, looks, says that the center one is leaning. Now the hands, because your hands have a great deal of work to do tomorrow, and none of it is work you would ordinarily call by that name. The gloves are white, kid, and they go above the elbow, and they are new, and they are the reason your fingers will be useless for most of the afternoon. Kid does not stretch the way modern glove leather does. It is fitted close, and it is drawn on with care, and, in a properly sized pair, with a certain amount of struggle. There is a whole small ritual of powdering the inside, so the leather will slide, of easing each finger separately, of never pulling at the wrist, because a glove split at the seam on the day cannot be replaced in the hour available. Your mother has been through this with you before. She will go through it again in the morning, and again she will do the drawing on herself, rather than trust it to you or to the maid. Once the gloves are on, you cannot really feel anything. That is the design. A gloved hand cannot fidget convincingly, cannot pick at a thread, cannot wipe itself on a skirt. The gloves are a set of restraints that look like courtesy. The fan is next, and here the object is doing something more interesting. Yours is a small one, painted, mounted on carved sticks, and its practical purpose in a hot, crowded corridor is genuine, because those rooms in late spring with several hundred people in heavy silk, were extremely warm, but its social purpose is to give your hands a job. A young woman, standing for 4 hours with nothing to hold, will do something with her hands, and whatever she does will be observed. A fan solves that. It occupies both hands, or one. It can be opened and closed, and held closed, and held half open. And none of those states means anything in particular, whatever the fan language pamphlets sold to the credulous would later claim. It simply gives you a place to put your attention. And the bouquet, which you will carry in the left hand, and which will be delivered fresh in the morning, because it must not wilt, and which costs a sum that would strike you as absurd if you allowed yourself to think about it. It is white. It is small. It will be dead by the following evening. Its function, like the fans, is partly to occupy a hand and partly to complete a picture, and the picture is the entire product being presented. So, right hand takes the train when you rise or holds the fan. Left hand takes the bouquet. Both hands sheathed in kid to the elbow. Head weighted with 3 quills and a yard of net. Shoulders pulled steadily back and down by a train hooked at the shoulder seams. There is not one part of you tomorrow that will be permitted to be simply itself. The rules for all of this were not secret, and they were not passed down by whisper. They were published. The Lord Chamberlain's office issued the requirements, and they circulated. They appeared in the court circulars in the newspapers. They were repeated at length and with commentary in the ladies' magazines that came into houses like this one every month. They were summarized in the etiquette manuals that sat on drawing-room shelves across the country. Books that told a family what was expected, and by telling them, made it possible for a family with the money and the sponsor, but without the inherited knowledge to comply exactly. Feathers 3. White. Train of the specified length, worn from the shoulders. Veil of tulle. Gloves. Long. White. This was information, printed and purchasable, and the fact that it was purchasable is one of the quiet mechanisms by which the whole system kept working, through a century in which the money in Britain moved considerably faster than the titles did. Your mother knows every line of it without needing to check, and she checks anyway. The magazine is downstairs on the writing table with a corner turned down. She has the plumes in her hand again. This is the 4th time. She lifts them, sets them, tilts her head, moves the center quill perhaps 1/4 of an inch to the left, and steps back to the doorway to see them from where the light is. She does not say anything. That is the part you will remember. Not the fittings, not the aching ankle, not the rehearsals, but your mother standing in a doorway in a rented house in Belgravia at 9 in the evening, silent, looking at the back of your head, moving 3 feathers 1/4 of an inch at a time. She has done this before, in a room very like this one, with her own mother standing where she is standing now. She knows precisely what fraction of an inch means, and she knows that nobody in that corridor tomorrow will consciously notice the difference. She also knows, and this is the harder knowledge, that the corridor will notice something without being able to name it, and that the something will be either that the girl is exactly right, or that the girl is very slightly not, and that there is no third result. So she moves them again. You stand very still, with your chin level and your shoulders back, because you have been standing that way for an hour, and the dress has taken over the job of remembering it for you. And you watch her in the mirror, and she watches the feathers, and neither of you says a word for perhaps a minute and a half. Then she nods, once, and puts them back in their box. The carpet in the drawing room has been rolled back against the wall. It was rolled back 3 days ago, and it has stayed that way. A long grey cylinder lying along the skirting board, like something washed up. And nobody has suggested putting it down again, because nobody expects the room to be used for anything else this week. The floorboards underneath are waxed and slightly slippery. That is the point. The floor at court is polished wood, and the whole business of the curtsey depends on knowing exactly how much your shoe will travel when you put your weight on it. And a carpet lies to you about that. There is a chair in the middle of the room, an ordinary drawing room chair, upholstered in dark green, turned to face the door. It is standing in for a throne. You have been curtsying to this chair since Tuesday. Here is what the movement actually requires, because it is not the small dipping bob that people imagine when they hear the word. A court curtsey is a full descent. You come forward, you stop at the distance you have been told, and you bring the right foot behind the left, quite far behind, and then you lower yourself by bending both knees until the back knee is very nearly touching the floor. Not touching. Nearly. Perhaps 2 inches above the boards. You go down slowly, in a way that appears effortless and is not, and the whole descent is made without your torso tilting forward, without your shoulders rounding, without your head dropping until the very last part of the movement, at which point the head lowers and you present the crown of it, plumes and all, to whoever is seated in front of you. Then you hold it. Not long. Long enough that it reads as deliberate. Then you rise. The rising is harder than the descent because you have no help from anywhere. Your hands are occupied. One holds the fan. One holds the bouquet. And neither is available to steady you against anything. And there is nothing to steady yourself against in any case. Your entire ascent comes from the thighs, and it must come at the same measured speed as the descent, and your eyes must come up level and steady, rather than hunting the floor for reassurance. And you are doing all of it wearing a train that begins between your shoulder blades and ends somewhere behind you that you cannot see. That train is the reason the movement takes weeks rather than an afternoon. On its own, the descent can be learned by a reasonably fit girl in an hour or 2. What cannot be learned quickly is doing it with something like 10 or 12 feet of heavy silk lying on the floor behind your heels, because the moment your back foot travels backwards, it is traveling into fabric. And if it lands on the fabric, you are pinned to the floor by your own dress, and you cannot rise. There are only 2 possible outcomes at that point, and one of them is that you sit down in front of the sovereign. So the back foot has to go back into a space that has been cleared for it. And the clearing is done by the person behind you, or by the fabric itself, if it has been arranged correctly at the moment you stopped walking, or by your own foot, sweeping in a small arc rather than a straight line. You have been taught the arc. You have been doing the arc for 3 days, and you have stopped thinking about it, which is exactly what was intended. Your mother is sitting in the window with the lamp behind her so she can see your silhouette. She counts. Not aloud, mostly, but you can see the small movement of her hand against her knee. Then there is the retreat. You may not turn your back. That is the rule, and it is the rule that ruins people. Having risen from the curtsey, you must move backwards out of the presence, and the distance is not short. Depending on the arrangement of the room, it may be a matter of a few paces, or it may be the length of a considerable hall, and every one of those paces is taken heel first into territory that is behind you, occupied by your own train, and possibly by another girl who has come in too close. The trick that everybody is taught is that you do not walk backwards so much as glide, keeping the feet low and letting them push the fabric ahead of them rather than catching it. The other trick, the one that matters more, is that at the moment you rise, you use one hand, briefly and without looking, to gather a portion of the train over your arm. This is done in a single movement. If you fumble it, everyone sees. If you look down to find it, everyone sees that too. So you learn to find several yards of silk behind your own back by touch alone, in one motion, while smiling pleasantly at a person you have never met. You have done this now, by your own count, somewhere near 200 times. It is worth saying, plainly, that there is an entire profession built on this. It is not a matter of a mother teaching a daughter, or not only that. Across London there are women, and some men, who make their living teaching deportment. And in the weeks before the drawing rooms of the season, they are extremely busy people. Some are former dancing masters. Some are women who were presented themselves 20 or 30 years earlier and have converted that single afternoon into a career. They come to the house, or the girl goes to them, and they teach carriage of the head, the management of a train, the walk, the entrance, and above all, the curtsey. The money involved is not enormous by the standards of the season, which is precisely why it gets spent. A course of lessons in the weeks before a presentation might come to something in the region of 2 or 3 guineas. Occasionally more from a teacher with a fashionable name attached. Set that against the dress, which has already cost between £20 and £40 by the time the train and the veil and the plumes are counted, and against the rent on this house, which is running at something in the order of £100 for the 3 months, and the deportment lessons look like the cheapest insurance available. A family that has committed several £100s to a season will not decline to spend 2 more guineas, making sure the girl does not fall over. Consider what that same 2 or 3 guineas represents elsewhere in the house. The housemaid downstairs is engaged at something around £16 a year, with her food and her attic room found for her. 2 guineas is 6 or 7 weeks of her wages. It is roughly what the family will spend teaching you to bend your knees correctly, and nobody in this house, including you, thinks that comparison out loud, because the whole structure depends on the 2 numbers never being placed side by side. Your teacher came on Monday and Wednesday, and will come once more in the morning. She is a narrow, extremely upright woman of perhaps 60, who was presented in the Reign's earlier years, and speaks about the corridor at the palace, the way a soldier speaks about a particular field. She does not flatter. Her method is to make you repeat the movement until you stop performing it and start merely doing it, on the reasonable theory that the fear will arrive tomorrow and take away everything that is not automatic. She said one thing on Wednesday that has stayed with you. She said that nobody there will be looking at your face. They will be looking at your line, and at your feathers, and at whether the whole shape moves as one thing or as a girl inside a lot of expensive fabric. She said this without unkindness. She said it as a mechanic might explain what actually fails in an engine. So, again, you walk in from the door. You stop at the chair. The right foot travels back in its small arc. The knees bend, both of them slowly, the back knee descending towards the boards, the spine staying long, the shoulders staying where they were put. The head comes down at the last. Hold. Rise at the same speed. From the thighs, hands occupied, eyes coming up level. The right hand finds the silk behind you without looking and lifts it over the forearm. And then backwards, in low sliding steps, towards the door you came in by, still facing the green upholstered chair, until your heel finds the threshold. Your left ankle has begun to complain somewhere in the last half hour. Not sharply. It is the dull, hot ache of a joint that has been asked to control a slow descent under load rather more often than it was designed to. And it announces itself at the bottom of the movement, at the exact moment you are supposed to look serene. You do not mention it. There is no version of this evening in which mentioning it results in stopping. You reach the threshold. You straighten, you let the train down off your arm, and it spreads across the boards behind you with a sound like a long breath. Your mother, in the window, does not look up from her hand on her knee. "Once more," she says, and you walk back in from the door. It is 7:15 when the carpet is rolled back into place and the chair pushed to the wall, and by then the dining room has been waiting for 20 minutes with its lamps lit and nobody in it. Dinner tonight is deliberately small. Your mother arranged this 3 days ago with the cook, in the way she arranges everything, which is to say, briefly and without discussion. Clear soup, boiled fowl with a plain sauce, bread, a little stewed fruit at the end that nobody will finish. No wine except a glass for your father. No second meat. Nothing rich. Nothing that sits. The reasoning is not delicacy. The reasoning is that tomorrow you will be laced into a bodice built to a measurement taken a fortnight ago, and you will stand in it and wait in it, in a carriage, and then a corridor, and then a room, for something between 3 and 5 hours before the moment you are actually there for arrives. Anything that makes the waist a half-inch less obedient tomorrow morning is a risk taken tonight for no return. So you eat clear soup at 7:45 in a rented dining room, with your hair still half-pinned from the trial arrangement, and one ankle throbbing quietly under the table. Your father is at the head of it. He came down at 10 past, having been in the small back room since 4, with the newspapers and a letter from his agent about a drainage scheme on the home farm. And he has said perhaps 9 sentences since he arrived in London 11 days ago that had any bearing at all on the enterprise the entire household is currently engaged in. This is worth slowing down for, because it is easy to read as coldness, and it is very rarely coldness. The presentation and the season that follows it are, in the division of labor of a family like yours, entirely your mother's department. Not partly. Entirely. She chose the dressmaker, negotiated the terms, took the house, wrote to the sponsor, submitted the application, holds the calendar, knows which of the 4 hostesses whose invitations matter, has quarrelled with which other one, and will spend the next 11 weeks in rooms she does not much like, being pleasant to women she does not much like, on your behalf. Your father's role is to have signed things and to pay for them. That sounds like a small role. It is not, in one specific and rather brutal sense. He is the reason any of this is possible, and he is also the ceiling on all of it. The estate produces something in the region of £2,200 a year in rents, less than it did 5 years ago, because agricultural rents across England have been sliding since the middle of the decade, and everyone with land is quietly discovering that land is no longer the reliable machine their grandfathers believed it to be. Out of that comes the upkeep of the house at home, the wages of the people who keep it, the schooling of your brother, the interest on a mortgage raised in your grandfather's time and never quite retired, and now 3 months of London at a rate that would horrify him if he sat down and totaled it, which is precisely why the totaling is being done by somebody else. He knows the number in general terms. He has agreed to it. He does not wish to hear about the plumes. There is a kind of man in this period, and there are a great many of them, who understands his function in the family as an underwriter rather than a participant, and who experiences discussion of the details as a form of being asked twice for money he has already given. He is not indifferent to your future. He simply has no vocabulary for it that does not involve settlements, and settlements come at the other end when there is somebody to settle with. So he asks you whether the fowl is done properly, which it is, and tells your mother that the drainage will cost more than the agent first said, which it will, and reads a paragraph of the newspaper aloud about a debate in the Commons that nobody at the table responds to. Then he is quiet, and eats, and is, in his own understanding of it, present. Your sister is on your left. She is 14, and she has not stopped watching you all evening. Not sentimentally. She is not moved by you. She is taking notes. She watched the plumes go on and off 4 times in the mirror upstairs, and she saw exactly which position your mother finally accepted. She watched the curtsey from the doorway for the last quarter of an hour, and you know she counted, because she counts everything. She has worked out that her own turn arrives in 3 years, possibly 4 if the money is difficult, and she has already begun assembling the file. What the dressmaker charges, how long the train has to be, which parts of the movement your mother corrects, and which she lets pass, how many times a person is expected to do a thing before it is allowed to be finished. At some point in the fowl, she asks, in a perfectly level voice, how long you had to hold it at the bottom. You say you do not know. Long enough to be seen? She nods and files that too. There is something clarifying about being studied by a 14-year-old. She has no interest in whether you are enjoying this. She wants the specification, and her interest tells you something about the household you are in, which is that the thing happening in this rented house is not being understood by anybody in it as a celebration. It is being understood as a procedure that the family performs once per daughter, and that everybody would rather perform correctly than pleasantly. The plates are cleared by a girl you had never seen before the 18th of this month. The staff of a house like this one, taken furnished for a season, is a hybrid arrangement and worth understanding, because it shapes the texture of every hour you spend here. Your mother brought 3 people from home. Her own maid, who has been with her 22 years, and who is currently upstairs pressing something. The cook, because the cook is competent, and because arriving with a strange cook in a strange kitchen in London in April is not a risk any sensible woman takes in a season. And a footman, who does the carrying and the door and the standing about at the back of the carriage, and whose height is a small part of why he was chosen, since a tall footman is a thing that is noticed, and a short one is also a thing that is noticed. Everybody else came with the house, or was hired for the 12 weeks. The housemaid and the kitchen maid are London girls, engaged through an agency in the Strand at somewhere around £16 to £20 a year for the housemaid, less for the kitchen maid, board included, wages paid quarterly, which means that if the season ends in July, they will be looking for a new place in July, along with several thousand other young women in the same position, because the whole city's demand for domestic labour swells and collapses on the same calendar. The scullery work is done by a woman who comes in daily and goes home at night to Pimlico. A charwoman scrubs the front steps 3 mornings a week. The girl clearing your plate has been in this house 11 days, in a household whose habits she is still learning, serving people who will be gone by the end of July. And she will spend tomorrow morning carrying cans of hot water up 2 flights of stairs from 6 o'clock, while the hairdresser works. And she will not see the dress finished. And she will not see the carriage leave, because she will be doing the bedrooms. You know her name. You have used it perhaps 4 times. She knows a great deal more about you than you know about her, in the specific way that people who empty basins and carry linen always do, and neither of you will ever remark on this. Your mother eats about half of what is on her plate. She has been doing this for 3 weeks, and it is beginning to show at the corners of her, in a way that has nothing to do with the food. She is running an operation with a fixed deadline, a fixed budget she is already slightly over, 1 participant who is 17 and tired, 1 participant who signs checks and reads newspapers, and a set of rules that are written down in only some of their parts. The published dress regulations she can consult. The rest of it, which invitations to accept, which to be unavailable for, how long to stay, who to be seen speaking to and for how long, is unwritten, held in the heads of perhaps 200 women in London, and she is not quite one of them. Her own presentation was in 1857. 22 years is long enough for a great deal to have shifted. She puts down her fork before your father has finished, which she would never normally do, and says the table will be wanted. The stewed fruit is brought and taken away almost immediately. Your father, understanding that he has been dismissed and not minding, folds his newspaper and takes his glass to the back room. Your sister is sent up. The cloth comes off. The girl and the footman between them clear the whole length of the mahogany down to bare wood, and then wipe it, and then wipe it again, because what is going on it next must not pick up a mark. The gloves come down in tissue. 2 pairs, white, elbow length, 20 buttons, 1 pair to be worn, and 1 pair to be held in reserve, in case something happens to the first between here and the palace, which is not an extravagance so much as insurance, since a soiled glove at the wrong moment cannot be fixed and cannot be hidden. They are laid out flat on the bare table under the lamps, side by side, 4 white shapes, fingers straight, thumbs turned in, like something waiting. Your mother stands over them with her hands on the back of a chair, looking at them for a long moment, without touching anything. Then she says, without turning round, that you should sit down and take the weight off that ankle, because she has watched you favor it since the 3rd rehearsal, and there is still the cold cream to do. You sit because it is easier than arguing, and because the ankle has in fact been complaining since the 3rd rehearsal, and you would rather not be told so twice. From the chair, you can see through the open door into the hall, and on the hall table, propped against the base of the lamp where it has stood for 11 days, is the card. It is not much to look at. Stiff, cream-colored, a little larger than a visiting card, and a good deal heavier, printed in a plain engraved hand with your name, the date, and the hour at which you are expected to arrive. Beside it lies the letter that came with it, folded once, from an office in a building you have never entered, signed by a clerk you will never meet, on behalf of an official you will see for perhaps 4 seconds tomorrow afternoon, and who will not look at your face. That card is the reason for everything that has happened in this house since the middle of March. The dress exists because of the card. The rented rooms exist because of the card. Your mother's headaches exist because of the card. And for the first 9 weeks of this campaign, nobody in the family knew with any certainty whether it would come at all. This is worth slowing down for, because the assumption most people carry about court presentation is that it was a formality. A girl of the right sort turned 18, put on white, and went. That is not how it worked. There was an application. There was a decision, and there was, at the other end of that decision, a real possibility of refusal, delivered politely, without explanation, and without appeal. The machinery sat in the Lord Chamberlain's office. It handled the ceremonial life of the court, which meant the arrangement of the drawing rooms, the issue of admission cards, the regulation of dress, and, most consequentially for a family like yours, the maintenance of the lists. A woman wishing to present a daughter, a niece, a stepdaughter, or a younger sister wrote in. She gave her own name, the name of the girl's parentage, and the connection between them. She gave the date of her own presentation, because that was the qualifying fact. And then she waited, and the office made a judgment about whether the pair of them belonged in the room. The first rule is the one that shapes everything else. You cannot present yourself. You must be presented by a woman who has herself been presented, and who is prepared to attach her name to yours in writing. Respectability, under this system, was not something a person could claim. It was something a person could only be given by someone who already had it, and who had a reason to hand a portion of it across. Consider what that does. It makes admission hereditary in practice without being hereditary in law. A woman who was presented in 1857 can present her daughters in the 1870s and 1880s, and those daughters can present theirs in the 90s, and the chain runs on quietly down the century, self-renewing, closed at the front. Any family already inside stays inside almost automatically. Any family outside must find a member of the inside willing to sponsor them, and must give that person a reason. Your mother is your sponsor, which is the ordinary case and the least complicated one, but the ordinary case is not the interesting one. The interesting cases are the households where the mother was never presented, because she married upward, or because her own family had land but no habit of going to court, or because she is dead and the girl is being brought out by an aunt. In those households, the sponsor has to be recruited, and recruiting a sponsor is a delicate transaction with no fixed price and no written terms. It is done through connection. A cousin who married well, a neighboring family with a title, and a daughter of the same age. A godmother chosen 20 years earlier, with precisely this afternoon in view. Which is one of the reasons godmothers of that period were selected with such care and so little sentiment. The sponsor lends her name and takes on a small quantity of risk, because if the girl she presents turns out to be unsuitable in some way the office has not detected, it is the sponsor's judgment that is found wanting, not the girl's father's, and there were grounds for refusal, applied unevenly and never fully published, which was itself part of how the thing worked. A family whose money came from a trade considered too close to the counter might find the application unanswered. Divorce in the household closed the door firmly, and closed it on the innocent party as often as the guilty one. Bankruptcy closed it. A scandal in the newspapers of any kind closed it for a period that nobody could specify in advance, because there was no tariff, only a memory in an office. Notice that the refusals are not about the girl. She is 17. She has done nothing at all. She is being assessed entirely on the record of the adults around her, and there is no mechanism by which she can improve that record or answer it. She can only carry it. The other thing the office was doing, all through this decade and the next, was managing a slow and awkward negotiation between two kinds of money. Land was still the older claim. A family with 3,000 acres in the shires and an income that had come out of those acres for 2 centuries did not need to explain itself to anyone. But by 1879, agricultural rents were falling. They would go on falling for 20 years, and the incomes attached to all that land were quietly thinning. Meanwhile, the fortunes made in shipping, in banking, in railways, in manufacture, in the trade of the empire, were enormous and growing and looking for a way in. The drawing room was one of the places where that negotiation was conducted. Not settled, conducted. A manufacturer's daughter could be presented, and increasingly was, provided the money was old enough to have stopped smelling of the works, provided the family had bought a country house and taken up county obligations, provided a suitable sponsor could be found. Each of those conditions cost something, and the sum of them was a kind of entrance fee paid in social effort rather than in cash, though a great deal of cash was required to make the social effort possible in the first place. What a sponsor could fix was doubt. If an old family with an unquestioned name presented a girl whose grandfather had built engines, the presentation itself became the answer to the question. She had been vouched for. The matter was closed, or at least it was closed in the room, whatever people said in carriages afterwards. What a sponsor could not fix was fact. A sponsor could not undo a divorce, could not restore a bankruptcy. could not persuade the office to overlook something it had decided not to overlook. The name attached to the application was an argument, not a key. And here is the part that a modern listener may find hardest to sit with, not because it was hidden, but because it was not hidden at all. Everyone involved knew exactly what the system was sorting for, and said so in letters and memoirs and household conversation, with no apparent discomfort. It was sorting for marriageability within a defined pool. The presentation certified that a girl was of a family the court recognized, which meant she was of a family the aristocracy could marry into without loss. The whole apparatus, the sponsor, the vetting, the train, the plumes, the ordered file across the carpet existed to establish that a small number of young women were eligible to be considered by a small number of young men, and to establish it publicly on a fixed date in a place where the fact could not later be disputed. Nobody dressed this up. Memoirs of the period discuss the season's arithmetic with the plainness of a farmer discussing stock. So many girls out this year. So many eligible men. So many of those men actually intending to marry. The candor is startling only because the modern habit is to describe these arrangements in the language of romance. The Victorians of this class did that too, in novels and in poetry, and then went upstairs and did the arithmetic. You know all of this. Not in these terms, but you know it. You have known it since you were about 12, in the way children absorb the shape of a household's anxieties without anyone sitting them down. You know that the card on the hall table is not an invitation. It is a verdict already delivered in your favor, on the strength of your mother's 22-year-old presentation, and your father's acres, and the absence of anything embarrassing in the family's recent past. And it is a verdict on them rather than on you. You also know, because your mother has told you twice, that a family 2 streets over applied in February and heard nothing, and has now gone back to the country, and that nobody has said aloud why. The cold cream is fetched and set down, and the jar opened, and the smell of it fills the corner of the room, faintly of roses, and more strongly of something waxy underneath. Before you give up your hands to it, you get out of the chair and go to the hall. The lamp is low. The card is where it has been since the 11th day of the month, propped against the brass, catching the light along its top edge. You pick it up. You know what it says. You knew what it said within a minute of it arriving. And you have read it perhaps 40 times since, at all hours, including twice by candle when you were meant to be asleep. You read it again anyway. Your name spelled correctly. The date, the hour. Nothing else. No promise. No good wishes. No acknowledgement that a household has been turned inside out for 11 weeks to be ready for it. You put it back exactly as it was, square against the base of the lamp, and go and hold out your hands. The cream goes on cold and stays cold, and the girl who is working it into the backs of your hands has been told to take her time, so she takes it. She works the knuckles first, then the spaces between the fingers, then the wrists, and you sit with your arms out in front of you, like something being measured for a purpose you have not been told. You will not be gloved for another hour, though. The cream has to be done twice, and between the 2 applications, there is the hair. The hairdresser came at 8:30, which is late for a house call and expensive for that reason. And he came tonight only to make certain of tomorrow. He will come again at 9 in the morning to do the whole thing properly, with 3 hours in hand before the carriage, and his fee for the 2 visits together is a little over £1, which your mother paid without discussion, because the alternative is a headdress that fails in a corridor at the palace with nobody to fix it. What he is doing now is a trial. He is finding out whether your hair will hold what is going to be asked of it. He is a small, unhurried man in a black coat who addresses your mother, when he speaks at all, and treats your head as a piece of joinery. He takes the pins out of the day's arrangement and lets the whole weight of it down your back, and looks at it in the glass for a while without touching it, the way a builder looks at a wall. Your hair is long because it has never been anything else. It has been brushed 100 strokes a night since you were 6 years old. Not for vanity, but because that is simply what is done, and it reaches past your waist when it is loose, and it is heavier than people who have not carried it imagine. None of that is enough on its own. Here is a thing that surprises people about the arrangements you see in photographs from these years. Very little of what appears to be hair on a woman's head in 1879 is growing out of it. The shapes are too large. The rolls at the back are too thick and too even. The coils are too dense. The whole architecture sits too high and too full for a single head of hair, however abundant, to be the only material involved. The rest is bought. There is a substantial trade in human hair in this decade, running out of the villages of Brittany and Germany and further east, gathered at fairs and sold by weight, sorted and cleaned and matched by shade, and worked up into switches and rolls and frisettes, and the pads that are known as rats, which are exactly what they sound like. A sausage of hair or wool or tow over which your own hair is combed to give it a shape it will not make by itself. A good switch of matched hair costs anywhere from a few shillings to well over £1, depending on length and colour. And the very pale shades cost the most, because they are the hardest to find and the hardest to match. 2 pieces belonging to you are in a box on the table, wrapped in tissue. They were bought in March. They are, to within an acceptable margin, the colour of your head. The hairdresser combs your own hair up and back and secures it, and builds the pad in underneath where nobody will ever see it, and pins the bought pieces in around and over it, and what accumulates under his hands over the next 20 minutes is not a hairstyle so much as a foundation. It has to be solid. It has to be capable of carrying weight at the crown without shifting, because the crown is where the plumes are going. The pins are steel, wire-thin, bent into a long, narrow hairpin shape, and he uses them by the dozen, taking them from between his own lips as he works, which is unhygienic and universal, and nobody remarks on it. There is also pomade, a little of it, worked through the ends with the flat of his hand, and its smell is heavy and sweetish and slightly medicinal, mostly grease with something added to disguise the grease. And there is the plain physical fact of it, which nobody writes down, because everybody at the time already knows it. The finished thing is going to weigh something. Not a great deal, but enough that by the 6th hour of standing, you will be aware of your own neck as an object with a job to do. He builds it, and stands back, and your mother comes and looks, and then the plumes are fetched. This is the whole reason for the trial. Not the shape, which he could do in his sleep, but the anchoring. 3 ostrich feathers and a length of tulle have to be fixed into that construction in the morning, in such a way that they will not slide, will not lean, and will not come out during a curtsey, a rise, and a backward walk of some distance in front of the throne of a queen who has seen this go wrong before and will see it go wrong again. He fixes them. He takes them out. He alters the position of one pin and fixes them again and asks you, without addressing you directly, to move your head slowly to the left and then to the right, and then to lower your chin as far as it will go and bring it up. Your mother watches the top of your head with an attention she does not give to most things. Nothing moves. He takes it all out again and says a word to your mother about the morning and packs his combs into a leather case. The hair comes down. It takes 10 minutes to remove the pins, and they go back into their box, and your scalp aches faintly in the pleasant way it does after being pulled at. And there are 3 separate places at the crown where the skin is tender to touch. Now the face, which is the shortest part of the evening, and the one with the most rules attached to it. There is very nearly nothing to do. That is the point. A young woman of your class in 1879 is expected to arrive at court looking like herself, only rested, and the entire acceptable cosmetic vocabulary consists of things that can be denied. Cold cream, glycerin and rose water, a little powder, rice or pearl, applied so lightly that its function is to remove shine, rather than to add anything. Lip salve, plain, which is understood as care of the skin rather than colour. That is the list. Anything more is not simply unfashionable. It is read as evidence about you. Visible paint on a young woman's face at this date belongs in the public imagination and in the language people use out loud, either to the stage or to a class of woman nobody will name in your mother's drawing room. And the association is close enough and unkind enough that respectable women who did use colour used it in quantities designed to be invisible and denied it if asked. So what happens is small. Your face is washed, the rose water goes on and is patted rather than rubbed. Your mother examines you in the lamplight, turns your chin with 2 fingers, and pronounces herself satisfied in a single syllable. What she is really assessing is not the surface, but the sleep. The one preparation the period genuinely relies on, and the one nobody can buy, is rest. And the great irony of the night before a presentation in a house like this one is that it is by a comfortable margin the worst night's sleep of the whole 11 weeks. Then the gloves. This is the last thing, and it is the oldest thing in the room, older than the court dress code, and older than the hairdresser's trade. The cream goes on again, twice as thick as before, until your hands are slick with it, and useless for anything. And then a pair of gloves is drawn over them and buttoned at the wrist, and you will sleep in them. They are not the gloves you will wear tomorrow. Those are white kid 16 buttons, and they are wrapped in tissue downstairs, and will not be touched by a bare hand between now and the moment they go on. These are old ones, softened and shapeless, gone slightly yellow inside from previous uses, and they are your mother's. She wore them on the night before her own presentation, 22 years ago, in a rented house on a different street, with her own mother standing where she is standing now. She does not make a speech about this. She mentions it in the middle of doing up the buttons, in the tone she would use for the time of a train. And then she goes on to the next button, and the remark closes over and is gone. You look at your two greased and gloved hands lying on the coverlet in front of you, and you think about that for slightly longer than she intended you to. Because this is the part of the whole enterprise that was never taught in a lesson and never billed for. The hairdresser can be paid, the dressmaker can be paid, and the deportment mistress, and the carriage, and the house. This cannot. It was simply handed to you, the way it was handed to her, along with the 100 strokes a night, and the trick of standing without leaning, and the knowledge that rosewater is patted and not rubbed. A long, quiet transmission of small, practical technique, mother to daughter, going back further than anyone in this room could trace, of which tonight is one link and nothing more. She puts the lid back on the jar and takes the lamp to the mantelpiece and turns it down. Before she goes, you look once at the glass on the wall opposite, where the light still reaches. The hair is down and loose and ordinary again. The face is your face, and yet something in the arrangement of the shoulders, or the way the chin is being held, or the sheer stillness of the figure sitting there in a plain nightdress, with its hands laid out in front of it like a thing on a shelf, does not quite resolve into anyone you have met before. You look at her for a moment longer, and she looks back, and neither of you seems entirely certain who is about to be presented tomorrow. Your mother does not leave. She has the lamp in her hand, and she has said good night in the particular tone that means good night. And then she stops in the doorway with one shoulder against the frame, and you understand from the angle of her body that there is more, and that it is going to be practical. She has a small notebook. You have seen it before. It is the size of a hand, bound in dark green cloth gone shiny at the corners, and it lives in the pocket of whatever she is wearing, and it comes out at odd hours, in shops, in the hall, at the foot of the stairs. She opens it now without looking down, because she knows the page. Tomorrow afternoon, she says. Then Thursday, there is nothing, which is deliberate, because you will be tired, and because the Hartfields are not worth Thursday. Friday is the Marchmonts, which is a dinner, and not a ball, and there will be perhaps 18 at table. Saturday is a concert, which is a very useful sort of evening, because nobody is required to be clever during the music. Then Sunday, church, and the walk afterwards, which she says with a particular flatness, as though the walk afterwards were an item of business, which it is. Then the following week she stops reading aloud and simply turns the page and shows you. There are 11 entries on it. This is the thing nobody puts in the picture of a girl in a white dress. Tomorrow is not an arrival. Tomorrow is the gate, and behind the gate is a road, and the road runs from now until the middle of August without a real gap in it, and every single stop along that road costs money, and the money is not infinite, and everybody in this house knows exactly how much of it there is. Let me put some figures against that, because the figures explain the tone in your mother's voice better than anything else could. The house you are lying in is rented for the season. 3 months, furnished, in a good street, taken in early April, and given up in the first week of August. Depending on the street and the size, A family in your position is paying somewhere between £300 and £500 for those 3 months. Not for a year, for 3 months. The same money would take a comfortable small house in a country town for 4 or 5 years running. Then the carriage. You do not keep a carriage in London, because keeping one means stabling, and a coachman, and a groom, and the horses, and none of that makes sense for 12 weeks. So you hire. A brougham by the month from a job master runs somewhere in the region of £25 to £30, and that is before the extra nights, when one carriage is not enough, and a second has to be found at short notice, which in the middle of the season, when every family in the same position wants the same thing on the same evening, is expensive precisely because everyone needs it at once. Then flowers. This sounds trivial, and it is not. You will carry a bouquet tomorrow, and you will carry flowers again and again through the summer, and fresh flowers in May and June in London, delivered to the door on the afternoon of the evening they are needed, cost several shillings a time, and are needed perhaps 3 times a week. Call it £15 or £20 across the season, and you have not overstated it. Then gloves, long white gloves, which are worn once or twice if the evening was cool and the hands were lucky, and which cost between 3 and 5 shillings the pair, and which you will get through at a rate that would astonish anybody who has never had to be immaculate 4 evenings in a week. Then the dresses themselves, which are the largest item after the house. Not one dress. A ball dress cannot appear twice in the same set of rooms within a few weeks and be thought new. It can be altered, retrimmed, given a different sash and different flowers, and sent back out. And it is constantly. And that is exactly what the dressmaker's alteration bill is for. But you will still need something in the order of a dozen dresses across the summer, and they run from £8 or £10 for something simple to 25 or 30 for the ones that matter. Set all of it side by side, the house, the carriage, the clothes, the gloves, the flowers, the fees, the extra servants, the cab fares, the tips, the endless small unbudgeted shillings. A family doing this properly, and not extravagantly, for one daughter, is spending somewhere between £800 and £1,500 in a single summer. Your father's income from the land, in a decent year, is perhaps £2,000. That is the arithmetic. That is what is sitting in the room with the two of you while she reads out the Marchmonts and the concert and the walk after church. It is not that the family cannot afford this. It is that the family can afford it once, and possibly twice, and not 4 times, and everybody has done the sum, including you, and nobody says it aloud. So what is all this expenditure actually buying? It is buying occasions. That is the whole mechanism, and it is worth understanding properly, because the process by which a marriage was arranged in your world was neither the romance of the novels, nor the cold transaction the novels were arguing against. It was something stranger and more procedural than either. It begins with the introduction. You do not meet a man. You are introduced to him by a third party who is responsible for the introduction being appropriate. That third party is usually the hostess, or your mother, or a woman of standing acting on your mother's behalf. And the fact that the introduction happened at all is itself a piece of information, because it means somebody with local knowledge considered him suitable enough to bring across the room. Then the dance card. a small, stiff card on a cord, with a tiny pencil, listing the dances of the evening in order. A man asks for a dance, and you write his name against a number. And that is a small binding contract of about 10 minutes. The card constrains everything. You cannot dance more than twice with the same man without it being noticed, remarked on, and reported back, because the whole room is reading the cards as a running commentary. 2 dances is interest. 3 is a statement. Nobody has to explain this to anyone. Everyone in the room can read it at a glance, and does. Then the call. This is the part people forget. If the evening meant anything, the following afternoon, a card arrives, or the man himself calls, and is received or not received. That is where the actual negotiation happens, in daylight, in a drawing room, with a mother present, and a fire in the grate, and a conversation about nothing whatever. The ballroom generates candidates. The drawing room sorts them. And then, if it goes far enough, the thing is settled almost entirely between the men. He speaks to your father. Your father asks about his prospects, his property, what is settled on him, what will come to him, what he can secure to you if anything happens to him. Solicitors on both sides draw up a settlement, which is a contract about money and land, and it is signed before any church is involved. Which means the truthful description of tomorrow, and of the 11 entries on the following page, and of the £800 to £1,500 is this. Your family is buying you access to a room. In that room are the sons of other families who have also bought access. What happens in the room is that a great many small signals are exchanged very quickly by people who have been trained since childhood to read them. And out of that traffic, over one summer or two, a name comes forward and is examined by lawyers. Here is the pressure, and it is entirely a matter of counting. You have this season. If nothing comes of it, you probably have next season, though next season will be cheaper, because a second season is a repetition, and repetitions are noticed, and money is finite. If nothing comes of that, there may be a third, and by the third the calculation has changed, because your younger sister is by then 15 and rising, and the house cannot be taken for 2 girls at once at the same standard, and one of you will have to be economized. She is 14 now. She was watching you at dinner. She has done this sum as well, and she did it before you finished the soup. So there are, realistically, 2 summers, perhaps 120 evenings in the whole of your life on which the thing is likely to be decided. That is the number your mother is carrying about in a green cloth notebook. And that is why she is standing in your doorway at midnight reading you a list of dinners when you have to be awake at 6. She finishes. She closes the notebook and does not put it back in her pocket. Instead, she comes into the room and sets it down on the chest of drawers, squared to the edge, on top of the folded gloves, where the grey light will fall on it in the morning, and where you will see it before you see anything else in the world. Then she says, mildly, that you are not to think about any of it tonight, and that tomorrow is the only thing there is. And she goes out with the lamp, and the door does not quite close, and you lie in the dark listening to her footsteps go along the landing, and stop, and go on, and stop again on the stairs, and you know without seeing it that she has paused at the turn to look down into the hall at the dress on its stand. The way she has paused there 4 times already this evening. The notebook sits on the chest of drawers, with its green cover going silver in the moonlight. And the room is quiet, and the road behind the gate runs on into August, whether you are ready for it or not. The house goes quiet in stages, and you can hear each one. First the landing, which stops creaking. Then a door 2 rooms away, closing properly, with the small double sound of a latch pushed and then pressed. Then the stairs, twice more, someone going down and not coming back. Then, much later, the area door at the bottom of the house, and the bolt going across, which is the last honest sound of any London evening, and the one that means the day has finally been given up on. After that, there is only the house settling, which is not really a sound so much as a series of small opinions the floorboards have about the weather. From where you are lying, you can see, through the gap the door has left, a long slice of the landing and the top of the stair rail, and beyond that nothing but darkness, with a faint grey shape in it that is the fan light over the front door. The dress is down there, on its stand in the hall, because there was nowhere else in a rented house to put a thing of that size that would not crush it. It is covered with a sheet. You cannot see it. You know precisely where it is, the way you know where a tooth is when it aches. The plumes are back in their box on the table by the window, the lid on, the box turned, so the corner does not catch anyone's sleeve in the dark. The veil is folded in tissue in the same box. The gloves are on the chest of drawers under the green notebook, the cold cream already going tacky inside them. Your hands, inside the gloves, are too warm, and you are not going to take them off, because that is one of the very few instructions tonight that costs you nothing to obey. You are 17 years old, and you are not going to sleep. And there is a case to be made that this is the most honest hour of the entire enterprise, because it is the only one in the last 3 weeks that nobody has scheduled. Consider what you actually are, lying there. You are, by any reasonable definition, a trained professional at the top of a decade of practice. Not in the sense the century would use, since you have never been paid and never will be, and the word work would not be applied to you by anyone in the house, including yourself. But you began this at 7. You have been corrected daily since then, in posture, in speech, in the management of your face. You can enter a room full of strangers and read within about 40 seconds who in it matters, who thinks they matter, who is being avoided, and by whom. You can carry a conversation across a 2-hour dinner with a man you have never met and will never see again, and leave him with the impression that he was interesting. You can do this while wearing a garment that restricts your ribs, and while managing a train you cannot see, and while calculating continuously in the back of your head who has spoken to you, and for how long, and what your mother will want to hear about it afterwards. You can also, as of this evening, lower yourself nearly to the floor and rise again without using your hands, and walk backwards for 4 yards in silk. That is a real set of abilities. It took 10 years. It required memory, physical control, and a kind of constant social arithmetic that would exhaust most adults inside an hour. And there is not a single certificate in England that records any of it, because the entire point of the training is that it must never look like training. The girl who visibly worked at it has failed. The whole art is to arrive at the top of a decade of drilling and appear to have been born knowing. This is worth sitting with, because it explains a great deal about what you were taught and what you were not. The education of a girl in your position ran along two tracks that did not entirely acknowledge one another. The first was ornamental and public. French, some Italian, drawing in watercolor. The piano to a standard sufficient to accompany, but not to dazzle. Dancing, a hand you could show. The word accomplishments covered all of it, and the accomplishments existed to be displayed in exactly the settings you are about to enter. You have been playing the same 3 pieces for 2 years, because those are the 3 you can play under observation, without your hands going strange. The second track was quieter, and it was conversational. You were expected to be able to talk, not to hold forth, which would be intolerable, but to follow, to know enough of what was in the newspapers to receive an opinion gracefully, to recognize a name from politics or the colonies or the church when it landed on the table, and to know roughly what it meant. Your governess read the paper before you did, and marked things, and you discussed them at 11 in the morning for 1 hour, and that was the whole of your instruction in the affairs of the country you live in. You have opinions. You have been taught, carefully, that opinions are for the drawing room after the men have gone, and not for the dinner table before. What you were not given was anything with a bottom to it. No Latin to speak of, no Greek, no mathematics past the arithmetic needed to keep household accounts, no science, nothing that builds on itself year over year until you can go somewhere new with it. Your brother had a tutor, and then a school, and the school had examinations, and the examinations led on into a life he could describe in a sentence. Your instruction had no examinations because it had no end point except tomorrow afternoon. There were women this year, in this city, arguing about precisely that. Colleges for women had been opening for a decade and more. Somebody in Cambridge was quietly proving that girls could sit the same papers as their brothers and pass them, and the papers were being marked, and the results were being talked about in the sort of periodicals that reach a house like this, and get read and put down again. You have heard the subject raised at dinner twice. Once it was treated as a joke, and once it was treated as a threat, and on both occasions you kept your face still and said nothing, which is a skill too. You are not sure what you think about it. That is not evasion. You genuinely have not been given the room to find out. Rain arrives around 1 o'clock. Not properly, just a fine spitting against the window that comes and goes with the wind. You listen to it for a while and think, without meaning to, about the dressmaker's assistant. She left at some point after 10. You did not see her go. Somebody would have let her out at the front rather than sending her down through the kitchen, because she was carrying a hat box, and the areaway stairs are steep and unlit. She has a walk ahead of her, or a walk to an omnibus that has stopped running, which means a walk. 2 miles, perhaps 3, east and a little north, to whatever room she has. She will be back at the workroom at 8 or 7:30, if the house she works for is a particular sort of house. She sewed the seam that lies against your left side. She knows the inside of that bodice better than you ever will, because she has had her hands inside it for a fortnight, and you have only ever met its outer surface. She is walking through this same rain right now, the same night, the same city, the same weather, and it is not remotely the same night. She is 19 at a guess, and she is worrying about something specific and immediate, and it is not a curtsey. Whether the two of you would have anything to say to one another is genuinely unclear and probably beside the point, because the structure that brought her up the front steps this evening, with a hat box in her arms, is the same structure that will send her back down them. And neither of you built it, and neither of you can step out of it before breakfast. You think about her for a while, and then you stop, because there is nowhere for the thought to go, and you are 17 and tired. A carriage comes along the street sometime after 2. You hear it while it is still 2 streets off, the way you can in a city that has gone properly quiet. The hooves first, and then the wheels catching up. It slows near the corner, and for a moment you are entirely certain it is stopping at this house, and your whole body goes tight in a way you did not order. Then it goes on, and the sound thins out westward and takes a very long time to disappear altogether. Somebody is coming home from something, a ball probably, a ball that other people were at and enjoyed, and left when they felt like leaving, which is a category of evening that does not yet exist for you, and will not until tomorrow has happened. The gloves are uncomfortable. The pillow is the wrong pillow, the way pillows in rented houses always are. The green notebook on the chest of drawers has caught a little of the street lamp through the curtain gap, and shows as a pale rectangle. The dress is downstairs under its sheet. The plumes are in their box with the lid on. Somewhere below you, the clock in the hall does something you can hear but not count. You lie on your back with your eyes open and rehearse it once more, the whole sequence, in your head, in the dark, without moving. Enter, card given, name spoken, train down, forward, stop, down and hold and up, turn to the left, down again, up, back, and back, and back, and out. Then again, because the first time you lost the middle. Then again, more slowly, the rain thickens a little. The window ticks with it. Sleep comes towards you in a long, slow curve, and then, at the last moment, does not quite arrive, and goes past, and you can feel it going, and there is nothing whatever to be done about that at 2:30 in the morning in Belgravia, in the spring of 1879. And then, somewhere between 3 and 4, without your ever catching the moment it happened, it does arrive, and you sleep badly for a while, and wake and sleep again, and wake once more into a room that is not dark any longer, but not light either. The particular grey of a London morning before the fires have been lit. The kind of hour where you can see the shape of the furniture, but not its colour. The house is cold. Rented houses always are at this hour, because the coal in them is being spent carefully by people who did not choose the grates, and have no long habit of managing them. The fire in your room went out hours ago, and nobody has been in to lay a new one, because the housemaid who would do that is downstairs helping with something else, because tonight was not a normal night, and this morning will not be a normal morning either. You lie still and listen. Below you there is already movement. Not a great deal. A door, water being carried. Somebody speaking very low in the hall to somebody else, and neither of them raising a voice, and the whole exchange over in 8 or 9 seconds. Then quiet again. You get up eventually because you cannot not get up, and you put something around your shoulders, and you go down. The drawing room door is open. Inside, the carpet is still rolled back from last night, still lying against the wall like a felled thing, and the boards are bare and pale where nobody usually sees them. The chair that was the throne is back where it belongs, angled towards the fireplace, entirely a chair again, and on the floor, in the middle of the room, laid out flat on a clean sheet that has been spread specially for it, is the train. Somebody has done this in the night. Somebody decided that hanging was wrong, that a fold might set into the silk overnight and refuse to come out, and that the only safe thing was to lay the whole length of it down on the boards, flat, unweighted, with the pile brushed all one direction. So it lies there, 3 and a bit yards of it, arranged with a care that would be strange applied to almost anything else, taking up most of the room. And it is the only thing in the house that has been given exactly the accommodation it required. You stand in the doorway and look at it for a while in the grey light, and it does not look like a garment. It looks like a piece of equipment, something with a job to do that will be done once. Here is what is worth saying plainly now, at the end of the night, before the house wakes properly and the day starts, and there is no time to say anything at all. What you have been prepared to do this afternoon is difficult. Not difficult in the way people mean, when they are being polite about a girl's nerves. Difficult in the way a piece of skilled physical work is difficult, with a standard and a failure condition, and an audience of people who will know immediately whether it was met. You have to carry roughly 15 pounds of silk, satin, and trimming, distributed unevenly, most of it behind you and below your shoulders, where you cannot see it or feel its exact position. Through a sequence of movements, you must perform in a room you have never entered, in an order you cannot check, at a pace set by other people, while your hands are occupied with a fan and a bouquet and the train itself, and while your head is carrying an arrangement of hair and plumes and tulle that will punish any sudden movement. You have to go down almost to the floor and come up again without your hand touching anything. You have to hold a position long enough to be looked at. You have to reverse out of a room without turning, judging the distance behind you by memory and by the feel of the floor through a satin shoe. And you have to do all of it looking as though it costs you nothing. That last requirement is the whole of it. Every physical skill in the sequence is doubled by the requirement that the skill be invisible. A carpenter is allowed to look like a carpenter. You are required to look like a girl who happens to be walking. So, the competence is real. Let us be exact about what it consists of, because it will not be listed anywhere else. You have a trained memory. 10 years of French verbs and dates of kings and pieces learned by heart at the piano have produced a memory that can hold a sequence of a dozen linked physical actions and reproduce them under pressure. You proved that last night on a rolled-back carpet, and you proved it again in your head in the dark, when there was no carpet at all. You have physical control, balance, posture, the ability to descend and rise smoothly with an unbalanced load, the ability to keep a face still while an ankle hurts. That was built by 10,000 corrections. Sit up. Shoulders. Not so fast. Again. You have endurance. You have been standing, fitting, rehearsing, and being adjusted since 4 in the afternoon yesterday, on a light dinner, and you have not complained where it could be heard. And you will do the same thing this afternoon in warmer rooms and heavier clothes for longer. And you will still be upright at the end of it. You can read a room. You have been trained since childhood to know within a few seconds who in a gathering matters, who is being managed, who is uncomfortable, what a silence means when a subject is being closed. This is not a small talent. In any other setting it would be called judgment, and men would be paid for it. You have language, some music, enough reading to keep a conversation moving, and the discipline to keep every one of those things pitched slightly below the level of the person you are speaking to. And you have, underneath all of it, a very clear understanding of what is at stake and for whom. You have understood the arithmetic of this family's position better than anyone has ever explained it to you, and you have not once, out loud, made your mother's job harder by saying so. That is the inventory. It is a real inventory of real capacities, developed over a decade of steady effort by a person who worked at them. And here is the other half, which has to be said in the same breath, and with no more heat than the first. None of it will be described as work. Not by your father, not by your mother, not by the newspapers that will print the list of names next week, not by the people in the room this afternoon. There is no vocabulary in this world for what you have done. If it goes well, it will be said that you looked lovely. If it goes badly, it will be said that you were awkward. In neither case will anyone say that a difficult task was performed well or poorly, because the fiction requires that it was not a task. None of it was chosen. You did not select the sequence, or the dress, or the date, or the sponsor, or the season, or the object of the whole exercise. You were entered into it the way a horse is entered. You have been, throughout, extremely good at something that was decided for you before you could speak. And none of it belongs to you afterwards. The skills do not transfer anywhere. There is no other room in the world where the ability to reverse out through a doorway carrying a train is worth anything at all. The entire decade of training has exactly one application this afternoon, and its value will be determined by whether a small number of people in a small number of rooms decide, over the following weeks, that you will do. That is the shape of it. A great deal of genuine ability, produced at real cost, funded by money the family does not comfortably have, expended on a single afternoon of approval, and then not counted. This is not a complaint about you. You would not make it yourself. And if it were put to you this morning in the cold drawing room, you would look at the person making it with polite incomprehension, because they would be describing water to a fish. It is not a complaint about your mother either, who is doing the only thing available to her with everything she has, and who has been awake most of the night, and who will be the one holding the whole apparatus upright this afternoon, while appearing to do nothing. It is only an observation about the structure. The structure asks a young woman to become, over 10 years, extremely capable, and then defines the whole of that capability as decoration, and then depends on it absolutely. Both things are true at once. The skill and the erasure of the skill. You cannot understand the afternoon without holding both. The light is coming up now, thin and without much colour, and the window shows the wet street, and the railings, and the black shapes of the area steps. A cart goes past, and the sound of it on the wet stone is quite different from the sound of a carriage at 2:30. Behind you in the hall, a door opens somewhere below stairs and closes again. The train lies on its sheet. The pile has been brushed all one way, and in this light it looks less like white and more like the colour of the inside of a shell. The plumes are in their box on the side table with the lid on, and the box has been placed exactly in the centre, away from the edge, where nothing can knock it. You cross the room and turn the lamp down, which somebody left burning low all night and which nobody now needs, and the small remaining light in it goes out, and the room takes on the grey entirely. And it is quiet, very quiet. Quiet in the way a house is only quiet in the hour before it is asked to do something.